Okay, no, it's not. This is probably one of the best books I've ever read. There's just so much stuff going on, even though there's 1,100 pages and never really slows down. Character dynamics just does everything the first book did, but a little bit better. I think this is like an almost perfect sequel. There's so many things well, and we're going to talk about all of them. We're going to break it down. This is almost going to be like a summary / review as opposed to just like a review. There's just so many events that happened in this book I want to talk about that might just come off as a little bit more summary-ish. So I'll just put that out right now. So first few things in part 1 is we have the epigraphs. And the epigraphs kind of foreshadow the ending very, very well. He got me hyped right away. Dalinar is clearly the ruler of Alethkar now. Alethkar is still technically the king, but Dalinar just kind of controls everything. He talks about the gem hearts, and whenever people get gem hearts, they have to give them to the king, as opposed to just keeping them themselves, and the king will distribute them. And this is obviously going to put a target on the king's back, which puts Kaladin in a very interesting position, because now he's the bodyguard. So now he has to kind of confront his biases about the Light Eyes. He's watching Dalinar closely. It just sets things up very, very perfectly right in the first few chapters. Then there's Sadeas and his wife. I like his wife. She's very interesting. She has a bunch of assassins and like a whole information network. But Sadeas, he just seems like a mustache-twirling villain at this point. Not a lot of depth. And then also immediately we get a nice countdown saying 60 days. I like countdowns personally. It's an easy way to like build the tension. Now, Kaladin's first chapter, I think the first line, he talks about breath. Now, for those of you who read Warbreaker, that's kind of a big deal, considering what we find out about Zahil later and a certain sword. I feel like this is just foreshadowing to the ending, and I think that's also like the last chapter of the book. Shallan's journey part 1 is also very interesting. In the beginning, she takes like a photo type thing or memory of this creature underwater, and then at the very, very end, it helps her survive. So that's a very nice closed loop. I like how Yasna talks about the economics of like getting rid of the Parshmen, because in every aspect of society, which we kind of talked about last week. And of course, her death. It comes out of nowhere. And it's very, very quick. And I'm like, it kind of didn't seem like a big deal in the moment, even though it was like, oh, her chest was stabbed, and she's clearly dead, and then the boat drowns, and then disappears because of Shallan's powers. And then also, another thing that happens towards the end of part 1 is that Amaram shows up, the villain of Kaladin's flashback, and kind of the reason why who he is, that we're shown. And I think it's interesting because like nothing really comes of it. It's just something that happens kind of off screen. And that's another thing that like happens later a little bit with Yasna and the people reacting to Yasna's death. It's just kind of like, okay, Elhokar doesn't care, or he grieved off screen, and Navani is grief-stricken, but also just doesn't want to like look at her notes for some reason. They find out like in between chapters that she died, which I think is very weird. I feel like that's kind of a waste of some emotional moments that could have been put on screen, as well as Kaladin meeting Amaran, because I was like, did they see each other? Like, Kaladin knows he's here. What does Amaran think about all this? What does Kaladin think? But we don't really get answers to that right away. It's just, okay, Kaladin's going to be training on how to use his powers for the next couple months. Then we get the interludes. Eshonai dies, I think. They meet these, like, Cthulhu-like Spren with these weird tentacles, and they, like, absorb her, kind of. It's very weird, very dark, but also very cool. And then we have Zahil, who has a voice inside of his head. Now, I thought, or he used to have a voice inside of his head. Now, initially, I thought this was very similar to, like, Zane from Mistborn, and how he was talking to, like, the god, like, the villain of these books. But no, it's just a reference to Nightblood, which I think is also very cool. It could have been two things. I'm curious if anyone else thought it was similar to Zane on their first read-through. So Shallan's journey there to the Shattered Plains gets interrupted because the boat, disappears, and she has to use what Yasna taught her to kind of survive and manipulate people to go to the Shattered Plains, which I think is cool. We are immediately shown her character progression and her character development, both in one, because she's very adaptable, and also she has her own spren now. I didn't mention that earlier. Its name is Pattern. It is very, like, robotic in nature, like, just the way it talks, as opposed to, like, Syl, who's, a little bit more bubbly. Now, I thought Shallan's journey was going to be the entire book, because Brandon Sanderson likes to, like, draw things out a little bit just for those payoffs. However, it was only half the book, which I think is a good happy medium. I liked how it was only like 500 pages and then she was there. And truth be told, on her journey there, I didn't really care about a lot of the characters. I thought she met Gavigan or Gaz, whatever his name is. And then Tin, who's like the assassins that worked with her dad apparently, and then also tried to kill Yasna. So that just puts Xiao in an interesting position, and it's all handled very well, even though I don't really like Tin as a character. I thought she was kind of annoying. Going back to the Shattered Plains, Kaladin, there's one of my favorite chapters of this book, and I'll probably be saying that a lot, but one of my favorite chapters of this book was when Kaladin was just learning how to horseback ride, because he was never on a horse. And it's just very, it's a good way to, sit with these characters and learn more about them and see how they tackle different challenges that normally wouldn't even be in a fantasy book, because, a lot of times in fantasy books, it's just alright, all the characters know how to ride a horse. But in this, it's you actually, have time. And Kaladin tries to, ride the largest horse, and it just doesn't end up well. So there's some comedic moments. And I can tell, when Brandon Sanderson is writing, I would bet you, he wrote this within, a couple of hours. He just came off the page. When it comes to Adolin has some more characterization. He's wondering if he will ever have any real friends, because he's royalty and everyone just kind of seems fake around him. And also the duels begin, so they're dueling for more shard blades and weapons. And what they do is, a lord of one house gets a champion, and a lord of another house gets a champion. They duel with their shard blades, and whoever wins gets their blade or their shard blade. And Adolin is very, very brutal right off the bat, which just kind of shows the dichotomy of his character. He's very, loving and very, happy-go-lucky a lot of the time. When he's battling, he will beat the crap out of you. So Shallan meets Kaladin, and when she meets Kaladin's already on a horse. He's mastered it, so there's a nice, obvious show-don't-tell passage of time being displayed, and I like that a lot. Their meeting kind of seemed like an enemies to lovers type of things. They were arguing, clearly didn't like each other. Kaladin just couldn't handle Shallan and her commands. But what was interesting to me was another kind of wasted potential for drama, where Shallan literally lies to Kaladin about who he is, and then later Kaladin finds out that she's there for Adolin and Dalinar. I thought as he is their bodyguard, he would be suspicious of her the entire book and wouldn't trust her if she lied about who she was. However, we find out he doesn't really even care. He's just kind of okay, yeah, she's the betrothed to Adolin. He's not suspicious at all that she maybe killed the real person who was betrothed to him and took his place, and there's none of that. Even though he doesn't like her throughout most of the book, it is very I felt that was kind of wasted with Yasna and Amarim. And then going back to Shallan's story again, she kills Tin when Tin finds out who she really is, and becomes part of this organization called the Ghostblood. We don't even know who they are, we just know that they had relations to Shallan's father, and they wanted to wipe out Yasna. Now, the chapter immediately after is another chapter where I'm this is one of my favorite chapters in the entire book, and it's where Seth shows up, because everyone's hyping him up. The Stormfather hypes him up, Syl hypes him up, Pattern hypes him up. It's kind of crazy, and Stormfather also says something weird, you're gonna kill Syl one day, which kind of happens in this book somewhat. We'll talk about that later. Anyway, Seth shows up, kills some people, takes away Hobber's legs, and Hobber is a Breach 4 member, so one of Kaladin's crew. The fight's very interesting because it's Dalinar, Adolin, and Kaladin. We know Kaladin is one of the greatest spearmen. We know Adolin is winning all these duels, and Dalinar is a huge warmonger. And the three of them are fighting one dude, and they are losing. So that's very, very cool. It's just a very, very hype moment. And I thought Kaladin was going to lose his arm because a shard blade cut through it. But when a shard blade cuts through your arm, I guess it's just that arm just becomes unusable. It doesn't cut off. It's just limp for the rest of your life. But Kaladin pushes Seth out of the building, and they both fall to their deaths. But not really, because they both have Stormlight, and they can kind of levitate. And because Kaladin's alive, Seth is oh, I must have saved him. Which comes up again later. But Seth actually quickly realizes that no, Kaladin used Stormlight, and that he is another Knight's Radiant. So Seth freaks out and runs away and abandons the assassination attempt. Even though throughout the book we've been learning that he's been wiping out all of these leaders per orders of Taravangian. And kind of shows that the entire world is going to chaos, and it just builds up that drama, and Taravangian as the main villain of these 5 books, I'm assuming. Unless we get another ruin situation. Now, the thing about Taravangian is, if he is in these 5 books, if he's like the antagonist of these 5 books, then he's only in 1 chapter of this book, maybe 2 chapters. I think I was hoping to get a little bit more of him, but that's more of a nitpick. Now, when Hopper loses his legs is another character moment I want to talk about, because it's very real, it's very interesting, because he's like ashamed. He's like, I can no longer be a part of Bridge 4, and they're like, no, you will always be a part of Bridge 4. You are one of us. And it's just a very nice, heartwarming moment. It's like he feels guilty for not being able to contribute much to the group anymore. Then Shalyn meets Dalinar, and before she meets all the royalty, she like draws pictures of them, which is another nice character moment, where it's just a thing that she does to like calm herself down and makes her seem a little bit more real. And it's another reason why I just like her. Now, Shalyn, when she meets Adeline, a lot of people I was reading online thought that was kind of a cringy moment, a cringe back and forth. But I didn't think so. I thought it was fine. Not like amazing, not super duper cute or anything like that. It was just like it was okay. And then another thing, Renarin, Adeline's younger brother, joins the Ghost Bloods, and I think that's just another dynamic that works very, very well. And Moash, one of the Bridge 4 members, arguably the most important one, goes to Kaladin and he's like, listen, I hate the king. He's clearly inept. He needs to be assassinated. Some backstory, which I'm not going to get into too much, just because I didn't think it was very interesting. Like, Kaladin meets with these people around the same time Shalyn meets with the Ghost Bloods. I thought they were the same group, because it's a very similar situation. But no, Kaladin meets with a completely different group, another secret organization. I don't know if it's too much to have two secret organizations. Shalyn and Adeline have a first date, and it's kind of fine. I enjoyed the chapter. There was like a controversial, juvenile moment, kind of, where Shalyn asks, like, in battle, when you're on the battlefield for 5 hours and you're wearing this armor, how do you go to the bathroom? And it's kind of a comedic moment, and I thought it was fine as well, just because it's like a realistic question you would probably ask somebody. So I don't really care about it either way. But it was funny enough. Now, Adeline has been struggling with self-confidence, as we kind of talked about earlier, and meets Ishonai to discuss a treaty for this war, but he completely screws it up. But unknowingly, Ishonai is kind of dead, I think, at this point. It was like corrupted by the Spren, so it's really not his fault. But it does add another layer to that character. So as we know, Kaladin and Shalyn have an enemies to lovers type of thing going on with this like love triangle, which I hate love triangles, but this one's kind of okay, just because there's a parallel with the secret organizations. They hate each other, and then there's a chapter where they have back and forth POVs. So she's infiltrating Amaram's castle, which we know, Kaladin hates Amaram. And Kaladin is using his powers to fly around. And it's very like a cathartic chapter for him. And there's a lot of internal dialogue with him. And they're both kind of learning how to use their powers, because Shalyn's powers with her friend is that she can light weave. And what that means is that you kind of like draw and make yourself look like somebody else. Something that's very complimentary to her character, because she loves drawing. So she infiltrates the palace, he's flying around. They're both learning how to use their powers. There's a good parallel there. But here's another great Shalyn moment. So in book 1, Shalyn has a moment where she reveals that she killed her father. This is one of my favorite twists of book 1. And in this book, we see that Amaram has a shard blade. And she sees the shard blade, and she sees that the shard blade he has is her brother's shard blade. So the audience puts together the pieces and realizes that Kaladin, because Amaram took it from Kaladin killed Shalyn's brother years ago. And so that's some dramatic tension that's going to put the two characters at odds. However, she thinks Amaram killed her brother, so she is now also vengeful, at least a little bit, to Amaram. So that's just very layered and very, very interesting, at least to me. Even though that was one of my favorite chapters of the book, we immediately get another favorite chapter of the book, which is the duel. So through some language that happened in the earlier chapter, Adeline accidentally wages 6 shard blades on a duel. And not only that, but basically due to the technical wording of it, he basically allowed it so that he could be facing an insanely high number of people. Adeline by himself is fighting 4 shard bearers, which is almost an impossible feat. He does do fairly well. Renarin tries to help, doesn't really do well either. He's not much of a fighter. Amaranth refuses to help. Sadius is obviously not going to help. The king obviously can't help. Dalinar, I don't think is allowed to help. And so Kaladin comes up, and he has this very cool line that everyone loves, where Dalinar is shouting about honor. He's like, does no one have honor? And then Kaladin says, honor is dead, but I'll see what I can do. And he fights him, and it's a great fight. He kind of just stalls because, Adolin is a better fighter. I honestly think this is... I'm forgetting a little bit, but I think this is the part where Syl dies. We don't really know why, but I think it's partially because of Kaladin using a shard blade briefly. And Renarin, I think, also used a shard blade briefly because he freaked out and left. And we don't know why. There was like a scream. And that kind of happens whenever Kaladin touches a shard blade because Syl hates shard blades. So there's a mystery building there as to why the Spren don't like shard blades. Ultimately, they win, and they both get this, wish, basically. There's a technical term for it, maybe I'll put it up on screen. But they get a wish, like a boon. I think it's called a boon. And the goal was to have Adolin get a boon and force Sadius to a duel. Kaladin uses it for himself and challenges Amaranth to a duel. A lot of people thought it was super cringe. But I thought it was, fine. I thought it was okay. I thought in the moment it was fine. My cringe meter is maybe just a little higher than most people's. And then because Kaladin is of lower station, he's a Dark Eyes, he gets thrown in prison. So there's a racism type thing here. Dalinar is doing everything he can to get him out of prison. And basically a month goes by. There's a good conversation with Wit. Wit shows up, who is Hoid from the other books. And I don't really remember what the conversation was, but it was probably fine. And when Kaladin leaves prison, we found out that Adolin was also in prison. He felt guilty, and he didn't think that it was fair for Kaladin to be thrown in prison, so he also went in prison with him. And that just adds just more layers to that character, even though I found out that a lot of people online didn't really think, Adolin was just kind of one note, and I was like, I don't know if people really know what one note means. Because I thought this Adolin was super interesting throughout the entire book, especially because they were rivals. Adolin and Kaladin, even up until this moment, don't really like each other, but they respect each other, and their relationship is growing, which makes the love triangle stuff more interesting. Now, every book of the series has a different main character, and how we know that is because one of them gets flashbacks. And Shalyn is getting those flashbacks. And she has about 10 or so flashback chapters that are super well done. So I think they start around this point in the book, so I'm just going to go through all of them and talk about just how well it works for her character. Because her character is all about lying to herself. She has a lot of mental health issues. She's, I guess, developing a multiple personality disorder, or a fantasy version of it. Because she has a lot of self-hatred, and that stems from this flashback. So it starts off with her mom dead, Guy being dead, and her father cradling her and telling her a lullaby. Which is very interesting because we know that her dad is kind of a terrible person and doesn't seem to be the type of person to do this. But because of the mom's death, he remarries, but he's not very happy. He slowly spirals down into a character that's just kind of an awful person and abuses everyone around him and kind of tears the family apart. Because of his anger, it tears the family apart. The older brother just kind of abandons them, the one that gets killed by Kaladin. And everyone's miserable, but Shalyn does everything she can to help her siblings. And one thing she does to help her siblings is she gets one of them a dog. After she finds out one of them has been dog fighting, she gets him a dog, I think, just to make him happier. She gets another brother, a girlfriend, I think. And she's trying to put the pieces of this family together. Her father obviously has favoritism towards her. He doesn't do anything to her, but he'll beat the other people, beat her brothers. I think physical abuse was a part of it, and things just kind of well up. And we find out that Hoid actually met Shalyn at one point, and that's a very good chapter because it kind of just there's some show don't tell with the medals from the Mistborn books, and he was using that to get her to like him, to trust him. I think the conversation was about her doing everything she can to be a good person. I think it was about being a good person. And I like how Wit and Hoid are just in these books more than previous books. Not as much as Tressily and we'll see, of course, but still, his importance is growing. And Shallon, basically things escalate. The father starts like beating other people to hurt Shallon. He's like, I'm not going to touch you, but I'm going to touch people you care about. And so he like slaps them or beats them or whatever. And it goes to the point where he does kill his ex-wife, he does kill his second wife. And he nearly kills her brothers, but she ends up killing him. And she ends up choking him out. And while that happens, she's singing him the lullaby. So it's a nice full circle thing. Now another thing is that we find out that Shallon's mom tried to kill her, and that Shallon ended up killing her, so Shallon killed both of her parents. And Shallon is technically the reason, and the father took the blame for it, willingly. And we find out that that's just, like, Shallon essentially tore her family apart. Technically, even though you can argue it's the mom, or you can argue it's the dad, but she blames herself, which I think just makes her the most interesting character in the entire 5 books. And it kind of builds up why she's lying. Like, she's repressing these memories. And there's like a mystery built up with pattern. Pattern's been there this whole time, I think, is like that's what's been implied. Now back to the modern day, there is stuff with the Ghost Bloods. The Ghost Bloods try to kill her. They fail. Because they find out that she killed 10, but then they end up using her like to infiltrate the palace. Now, as we mentioned, Sadie tries to flat out kill the king in an assassination attempt. They're on like the Shattered Plains, and I guess like one of the people did something that like made the bridge that Shallon and Kaladin were on collapse and killed a bunch of people. But Kaladin and Shallon both survive, and they both think about their Stormlight, just kind of like Zeth earlier. And Kaladin is like, oh, I must have saved her. And Shallon is like, oh, I must have saved him on accident. And they survive, and they like go through the chasms. It's probably one of the best few chapters of the book. Because again, they have like a love-hate relationship towards one another, and there's some good comedic moments. They try to fight a chasm fiend, and at the end of it, Shallon completely opens up to Kaladin, shows him her shard blade, and kind of talks about her past. And Kaladin is surprised that she is still as bubbly and as cheerful as she is, and is jealous of that. Which I think is very interesting, because we know from our POV that it's kind of like she's lying to herself. That's like what I get. But Kaladin is like, no, it's a positive thing. So I'm wondering if it's supposed to be conflicting, or if I'm reading too much into it, and it is supposed to be a positive thing. But I look at it as a self-torture type of thing, like she's not being honest with herself in reality, just because of all the trauma stuff. She's not facing it properly, because her story is all about lies and truths. And it kind of forces them to be more together than Adeline and Shallon. And I like all 3 characters a lot. They're probably my top 3 characters of the books so far. And then the love triangle, which is kind of YAE. And I think Brandon Sanderson even talks about how, like, if he was a woman author, people would classify his books as YA. But because he's a dude, he's like, no, I can, like, for some reason just get away with calling it fantasy. Which I think is very interesting and probably very accurate. Just given especially how Mistborn is handled. But even so, I still eat it up. I still think it's all very well done. There is an interlude chapter that probably I'm talking about out of order. But there's a character called Lift, and there's a character called Darkness. And I like Lift, and I want to see more of her. I know there's a book called Edge Dancer, which is a novella, which I will read. And she is just a very breath of fresh air. Like, she's very happy-go-lucky. She's a child, so it's like she has these powers. She's a Knight's Radiant, which is very interesting, but she calls it like her awesome powers, or like she just calls the powers awesome. She's like, my awesomeness is activating. Very like child-free, carefree, as opposed to like Shallon, who is like very bubbly, but also very like traumatic at the same time. Lift just seems so far to be just fully bubbly and fully happy. I'm sure that will change, and especially once we get to her book, which I hear she will be the main character of book 6 whenever that comes out in like 10 years. But, of course, the novella. So I'm excited to see more of her. And now I think it's just time. I think we've covered everything I like, so let's talk about the Sanderlanche. But because of the Shattered Plains incident with Sadius, Kaladin has a leg broken, and because Syl's dead, she can't heal him. So because of that, he stays behind, while Dalinar gets all the armies, or most of them, and goes into the Shattered Plains. He wants to end this war once and for all and attack the homeland of the Parshendi. The countdown is near 0, and they're doing it when a time when a high storm will not happen, or is not supposed to happen. Now, as we talked about, Moash wants the king dead, while Dalinar is invading the other camp. Moash carries out an assassination attempt, and Kaladin tries to stop them. And it's super interesting because Kaladin starts feeling pity for Elhokar, at least a little bit, just because he's clearly depressed and he's very alcoholic. Like, when they find him, he's like drunk off his mind, and he tries to save them, but he struggles. And eventually, the whole will he save him or will he go with Moash, that allows him to speak the second ideal, I think, and then Syl comes back, and Kaladin gets a nice power boost, and it's awesome. Now, just before that, Kaladin finally convinces Dalinar that Amaram is a kind of a terrible person, right? Because Dalinar loves Amaram. Everyone loves Amaram. Everyone thinks he's like the perfect dude. Of course, Kaladin knows better. And so when Kaladin wants to like challenge him halfway through the book during the Colosseum battle, during the duel, everyone was like, what? That's crazy. But Dalinar he trusts Kaladin. So when Kaladin's saying all these things, he's like, I'll look into it. But when Amaram also doesn't help Adolin during the duel, he kind of grew suspicious. And they use Taum, who is, as we know, he is one of the heralds from 4,000 years ago. He shows up at the end of the book 1, and he's in this book as like a crazy person, and they used him as bait to like see if Amaram had interest in him, or if he was lying about him. I don't remember the details, but it was very interesting because Amaram now shows his true colors to Dalinar and the others, and just kind of confesses everything, and is no longer trusted. So there's some nice progression, but it does seem just kind of like thrown in there, just to be like, alright, the book's ending, we got like 200 pages left, let's just get it out of the way. Now, I think this part has like the higher stakes in book 1, just because it's like, if Dalinar and his army lose, how far will the Parshendi go? Because the Parshendi are like evolving, they're becoming like the Voidbringers. They have this like new storm that's like occurring because they're evolving, called like the Everstorm. And it's an evil storm, as opposed to the High Storm, which I thought was like an evil, like antagonistic man versus nature type storm. I guess this storm is worse. And the Everstorm and the High Storm collide during the battle, which I thought, I kind of figured, I would have to like look as to why the High Storm appeared. I think it's just because the Everstorm was appearing, but I thought the High Storm was not supposed to appear, so I gotta double check why. But even so, the Everstorm and the High Storm clash, and it creates like this insane force on the battlefield, because they're on plains, and they have two very, very high windstorms colliding, so people are just kind of getting thrown around, their tents are getting thrown around. Shallan is trying to find the lost city of Urithiru, which we haven't really talked about at all, but that's been a thing that's building. There's like an ancient lost city that they're trying to find, and it's basically the only way they will be able to properly retreat. So there's a lot of tension there, because it's like, how do you find an ancient lost city? But they do, and most of the people in the army get teleported there, even though they basically win the fight anyways. Now, Kaladin gets his powers, and is able to join the fight towards the end, because I think Dalinar is able to take down Ishonai, or maybe it's Adolin, because Ishonai falls, and then the battle keeps going. And then Seth appears again to kill Dalinar. And I think this is another nitpick where I'm just like, I don't feel like anyone's dying, at least none of the main characters. It's just a bunch of side characters that die. Because I really thought Dalinar was going to die. Like, full stop. I was like, this is the end for him. But no, Kaladin saves the day. And it's cool, because now it's like, alright, everyone knows he has powers. And that shifts the dynamic. And even before the battle starts, Dalinar kind of finds out that Shallan has powers. So that shifts that dynamic too. And things are finally starting to like everyone's starting to be more upfront with each other. Because again, Navani didn't look at Yasna's notes, So Shallon is just kind of like, Shallon can't say everything she wants to say because no one's gonna believe her unless they look at those notes. Especially when it comes to like the Parshmen. Now when the battle ends, they're able to convince everyone to go to the lost city of Urithiru, and they abandon the Parshmen. So that's good. But now the Everstorm is going around, destroying all these cities, and Kaladin says that it's going to head for his hometown, so he goes to visit his parents. Which is very interesting because like in the hero's journey, typically it's like that happens at the very end. So I thought after at least the 5 books, he would go home, but no, now it's happening next book. I'm very excited to see what happens, just because there could be a lot of drama there. Now another nitpick that I have is that Adolin just kills Sadius in like a fit of rage, which I think was random and weird to me. But he was like, Sadius is just gonna get, like, the stakes are higher now. The Voidbringers are back, the Knights Radiance are coming back with Kaladin and Shallon. And Sadius is still scheming politically, and he's like, this guy has to be gotten rid of. Like, we had to get rid of this guy. So he kills him. I was like, dang, I kind of want to see, like, Sadius interact with, like, Taravania and Yasna, the gods, if gods show up, whatever else. Like, I want to see Sadius' perspective on all these, like, ancient beings, just because he's very in the now with his politics. But now he dies. Dalinar then talks to the Stormfather and I guess, like, the Stormfather kind of becomes his friend, which is very cool. But yeah, no one died. Even so, it's still my favorite book I think I've ever read. Like, there's so many moments that got me super hyped. So many good, like, character moments. When you have, like, 1,100 pages, it's a little easier to do that. But it's still probably the best experience I personally had reading a book almost ever. Now I'm still getting into books, getting into reading again. So I haven't read it. I can't say I've read as much as a lot of other people. Even so, I think this is still really, really well written. And I would recommend it. It's like 1,100 pages. But even so, it kind of goes by very quickly. There's just so much in these pages. And I highly recommend it. I guess I'll give it like an 8 out of 10. Because even though I just said it's like the best book I've ever read, I hope there's still a lot of books out there that I haven't read that are better than this. So I think 8 is a good number to give it for now. And I highly recommend it. The Stormlight Archive is amazing so far.